So the financial claims are becoming that what has been labeled by Karl Marx in his Capital in the third volume. Very few people have read it, but there is a fifth part in this volume on the interest-bearing capital. And in that part of several hundred pages, Marx describes very exactly and very useful also today the outbreak of financial crisis and how they work, what are the consequences and so on. And he uses the term fictitious capital. Fictitious capital, that means it is only a claim which is constructed. It's a construct. It is not real. But on the other hand, this claim is insofar real as it needs real returns which are channeled to the financial sector. So long as this works, there is no financial crisis, but we know that in the real world there are limits to service growing financial claims, so that there is the point when the financial claims are no more serviced and then the financial crisis breaks out. The method, the model, the business model of the financial sector has been coined as originate and distribute. That is a term very common in the financial industry, and it means that the financial industry originates financial claims, and then it distributes the artificially produced financial claims all around the world. That was what happened with the subprime sector, with the real estate sector. The credit to a mortgage taker, to a person who got a credit in order to pay for the new house, that has been bundled into, with other credits, sometimes thousands of different credits bundled together, and then there has been originated, artificially made, a paper on it, a certificate. It has been securitized, and then this paper has been sold on financial markets internationally to Icelandic banks or German or Italian banks, but the Italians were much more cautious than the German banks have been, and they bought it and they had it as an activum in their budget, in their balance sheet, until it proved that this paper is worthless because the original debtor, the person who bought the house with this credit, is not able to service it anymore. Therefore, there is, until up to a certain degree, some kind of the autonomy of financial markets, but it is limited in size, in time, and in space, and then the financial crisis breaks out. Oh, I go back. So, and the financial crisis, that means there are huge write-offs of financial wealth. The papers, the securitized credits lose their worth, and that has to be realized by financial institutions. And I give you the figures published by the IMF and partly by the British Bank of England. And in spring 2008, that is a year ago, the IMF estimated the losses of the global financial sector up to 1,000 billion US dollar, 1 trillion US dollar. That is a huge sum, as you can figure out. But then in November, In autumn, it was already 2,000 in the estimates of the IMF, and the Bank of England already said, no, it's not 2,000, it is 2,800. That was in a report at the beginning of December. And then in April this year, that is 4 or 5 weeks ago, the IMF said the losses are 4,100 billion US dollar, which have to be written off. And that means that the banking system in some countries is nearly or completely insolvent. That is the case for the US-American banking system. It's also the case for the German banking system. They have more outstanding obligations than the capital which is underlying it, so that it is insolvency, which is the characteristics of many banking systems in the world. And when the system is insolvent, then of course the state has to come in, what the state already did. These are figures by the European Central Bank showing very clearly the breakdown of growth of GNP in the last few months, or the increase of unemployment in Europe and elsewhere, or the declining real growth rates on the one hand, and the increase of indices of energy, commodities and food, or the real commodity prices and so on. And today, I have it on my memory stick. Today I received, because I am a subscriber, the quite recent review of the OECD, the economic report of spring 2009, and there are more recent data, but they show the same as that what I present here. The tendency is the same. It is becoming more and more dramatic. Well, the crisis has ecological dimensions. It is a multiple crisis, and then very clearly is that the fossil capitalism, since the Industrial Revolution at the end of the 18th century, has a lot of disadvantages. The first disadvantage is that it is dependent on energy which is limited, because it's the stocks in the crust of the earth, and because also the sinks for the combustion, for the greenhouse gases, also are limited. That was not the case so long as humanity was dependent on solar radiation. This energy form is not limited, it is eternal. But oil and other fossil fuels are not eternal ones, they are limited. That is very clear in the case of the United States, the so-called Hubbard curve, because it has been discovered by geologists in the 50s already, and he said at the end of the 50s that the United States will realize 72 the peak of oil production, and then oil production will continually sink, and that is what happened. It happened exactly that. And so the United States, who were an net oil exporter in the 50s and 60s, more and more became dependent on oil import, which explains to a certain extent the aggressiveness of United foreign policy, because they are dependent on imports of oil, they are dependent on secure energy provision, and therefore NATO developed an energy strategy and so on and so forth. Well, and that is what is not for the United States, but for the world as a whole, and also the world as such will experience the peak of oil production, and nobody knows exactly whether it already happened. There are some geologists saying it happened already, 2005. Others say it will happen 2010, that would be next year, or perhaps 2020. This means that there is oil still. There's as many oil as before, but the curve of oil supply is decreasing, whereas the curve of oil demand is increasing. And this means that inevitably the price of oil will increase. There will be times when it sinks, but the tendency, the trend, the long-term trend will increase.